we have the ability to dream. We have the ability to see things that aren't existing yet and figure out how to help make them exist, how to put them in place. Again, in our material sense, in the world that where we live, there's so many things that we can do. And so my encouragement is to everybody to go big in. Go back to unlimited potential, believing in people and believing in yourself. And with that idea that, that world creates so much opportunity if we're just willing to do something about it.
Hi there, I'm Kevin Gentry, and welcome to the Going Big podcast, where we'll explore some of the strategies that can help you transform your effectiveness by 10xing your fundraising. Each week, we'll sit down with some of the most influential business leaders, CEOs, and nonprofit visionaries to talk about leadership, the power of giving, and how you can make a real impact. If you want to make a transformational change to the cause you're working on, this is the place for that conversation. Also, take a look at our website, 10xstrategies.com. That's TENX strategies.com for lots of free marketing and fundraising resources, and be sure to sign up for the free weekly fundraising tips. Now, let's dive in. Well, what a pleasure to be with one of America's top business leaders, one of the most generous philanthropists, Doug, and his wife, Maria. The DeVos family have been very generous in so many ways. And Doug is something of a bit of a community organizer, too. And so we got a lot of stuff to talk about. And Doug, a lot of this is based on how you think about believing in people. And you've got your Believe podcast. You're inspired in part by your dad's book, Believe. If it's okay, I'd like to go through some of the principles that have really guided your family over the years, as I understand it, because you all have really gone big. This is the Going Big podcast, right. And you all have gone big based on these principles, as I understand it.
Absolutely. I'll go anywhere you want to go, Kevin, because it's just so fun to have this chance to do this with you and to be with you, as you said, about the years that we've known each other and the experiences that we've had together. It's really fun to talk about going big and how we build on all these ideas and these principles that have been part of our lives and that we've shared and that we've, many things that we've worked on together.
Well, awesome. You're good to do this. Well, thank you. Well, this is going to be fun, I think.
Absolutely.
And you and your family epitomize, in my judgment, going big and have inspired me. So right out of the box, how do you think about people's potential? Any person's potential. I mean, that is sort of the core of believing in people, but how do you think about mine, yours, anyone's potential to do something with their life?
Yeah, sure. Well, to unpack some of these things as we talk about these principles, I'm going to go back to probably mostly Amway stories, if you don't mind, and talk about the business that I grew up in and that I was part of for virtually all my career. And well, I guess I'm still part of it. I guess you never really leave, right? So it really kind of comes down to believing in people and believing in potential. One of the things that my dad and his business partner Jay Van Andel, as co-founders of Amway, that they talked about all the time, is that when you would give somebody an opportunity, they believed people would do something with it. And that just the expression of giving them an opportunity, they believed in the potential and the talents and the skills and the determination of the individual. And they never wavered on that. They were always believing that. They spent all their time, and we've spent all of our time in the Amway business finding people from all walks of life say, you can do it. We believe in you. And that the performance of people that you never would have expected, that you would have thought, you're in a meeting and you see somebody and go, well, this person over here, I bet they're going to be really successful. They have this, educational background. They have this sort of business background, and I bet they're going to be great. And maybe they were great in those areas, but they weren't very good at Amway. And then you'd find somebody else who maybe didn't, have the same sort of background or the same sort of experience, but boy, they had something inside of them. and they were ready to learn, and they were going to work hard, and they have turned into some of the greatest leaders we've ever seen in our business. And so you always have to look at the individual and say, somewhere in there is incredible potential. And I don't know what it's going to be to unlock it. Now, there's a lot of great people who joined Amway who weren't successful, who are still great people outside of our business, right? Absolutely, they've done great things. But you believe that in everybody. And I believe it so strongly because that's been my experience, where you see people from different walks of life and you see what they do and you see how they work and you see what they create and you see how they add value and you see all the different ways in which people can do that with different personality types, different skill sets, different objectives. And it solidifies this belief in the potential of all people to achieve great things and to really have impact for their own futures and their own life and for the people around them as well. So that's where it kind of all comes back to.
Well, terrific. Well, I want to understand also what you think can sometimes hold people back. But to your point, I remember either you've told the story or your dad told the story or maybe both told the story.
Well, if he told it, I probably just repeated it.
Well, the time I think he was going to maybe Malaysia and a meeting with the prime minister there. And, we can get caught up in thinking like, well, I'm just not smart enough, or I don't have the credentials, or I don't have what's necessary. We don't need natural resources in a country, so to speak. It's a lot of times it's just we have this possibility, this opportunity. Tell us the story.
Sure. So this was many years ago. The Amway business had just started in Malaysia. This is in the late 1970s. And we had a good start. Business was going well. We were there. I wasn't in this meeting with the prime minister, but I happened to be there for these for the Amway meetings. And the conversation was just very cordial, talking about business, and the prime minister relayed to my father that it was a tough time economically for Malaysia, that the price of copper, tin, and oil, which were Malaysia's greatest natural resources, was depressed on the global market, and that was impacting their economy. And they talked about that a little bit. And then he turned the subject, said, "But your business is growing. You're going to have thousands of people at this meeting tonight. The business has been growing wonderfully well. You're investing in our country." He goes, "Well, what's the secret?" And that's when he said, "Well, Mr. Prime Minister, you may believe your greatest natural resources in Malaysia are copper, tin, and oil. But in Amway, we believe your greatest natural resources are the people of Malaysia. And in Amway, we invest in people." And that was just the fundamental elements, again, of investing in people and believing in people and finding people. And from that business, those early days, so many people and their families are still with Amway today. They've built big businesses. They've built, incomes for themselves and for others that have stood the test of time and are continuing to, many of them continue to be active, or their families or their descendants are being active. Wow.
Well, you all have affected hundreds of millions of people around the globe. I know that. I want to dig into more about Amway, but more about on people as well. What do you think holds us back from doing more? I know you sometimes said, well, you can't win the race unless you get in the race.
Yeah.
But what holds us back?
It can be a variety of things, and a lot of them are real. There are real barriers that we face in life. Somebody puts a barrier in front of us, whether it is an education barrier, or maybe it's more personal. It's a family barrier where you had an issue, with your parents, or something that's happened in your life, or you have a genuine health issue. There's a lot of genuine things that will hold someone back from achieving their potential. And the tough part is, it feels like sometimes when there are those real barriers, people get stuck, and they kind of, every time they look, they see that barrier. And what we've always tried to do is say, well, okay, there's a barrier. I get it. It's real. How do I get around it? How do I get over it? How do I get under it? How do I do something different? How do I partner with somebody to learn that skill or to overcome that barrier, whatever that may be? And so sometimes it's persistence, it's determination, it's this idea that barriers are real. They're everywhere. And there's a lot of things to hold people back. But it's the fact that you don't let the barrier hold you back the whole time or keep seeing it right in front of your face. Change your perspective, move around, do something different. And again, you'll find, Kevin, that, and I think you know already from knowing me, all I do is tell Dad's stories about him because they prove to be so good.
Well, they are pretty good stories.
Yeah,
I learned a lot from him.
He's done pretty well, but he was speaking at a college graduation, and it was a tough economic time, and a lot of the people were talking about how tough the economics were, and it'd be hard for your graduates to find a job, and be careful, and this and that, and then it was his turn to speak. He said, "Don't listen to him. Don't listen to any of those people." Yeah, it's a tough time, but it's the only time you have. So figure it out. You have this education. You have these opportunities. Figure it out. You're going to be an entrepreneur. Maybe don't get a job. Maybe start a business. Maybe do something else. But this is the only time you have. You have this amazing education. Go do something. You have this determination that you're achieving something. You've graduated. Move forward and try to encourage people in that sort of way. And I think what holds people back is they just get stuck. And that's the toughest thing. And I sympathize with people when they're in that place because I get it. There are barriers. We've all been stuck to a certain extent. But we don't have to stay there. That's the biggest thing is you don't have to stay there if you're stuck. Maybe you take a few steps back, you regroup, you look at things different, you put it together in a different way and find a different path and try something new, see if that works. And so we've just, while those barriers can be real, our experience has always been those barriers can be overcome and you can find ways to achieve success, to add value to your family, to your community, regardless of the barrier.
All right. So if the first principle as part of believe is your unlimited potential.
Yeah.
I want to obviously keep going to number 2, start talking about accountability and freedom. But before that, because you touched on something, your dad and his longtime friend from childhood, Jay Van Andel, determined at an early age they wanted to go into business together.
Yeah.
But my understanding is the first business was not Amway. They did some crazy things that, I don't know, they failed or succeeded, but tell us a little bit about some of their first ventures, because it goes right along with unlimited potential, in my judgment.
Absolutely. So they struck up this relationship in high school, buddies in high school, and always talked about getting in business together. And that was a couple of things behind that. Jay's father was in business for himself, and my dad's father had a difficult relationship with his employer and would always say to my dad, get in business for yourself. And so the two of them always talked about it. And the timing was such, right after high school, both of them went to serve in World War II. But they wrote letters back and forth to each other. Someday this war is going to end. Someday we're going to be able to get in business together. Someday we're going to come back home. So, and they would exchange these letters throughout their time in the service. And they got back, and actually Jay returned a bit earlier than my dad did, and had a business opportunity. I can't even remember what it was, but it needed some money, and Jay said, we're 50-50, we're partners, so I think we should do this, and I'll get it set up so when you get back, we'll be able to do this. And I often thought that Jay could have just done that on his own. But he talked about the principles of a friend, and of him. He said, no, we always said we're going to do something together. So I'm not going to start something on my own just because I'm back earlier. We're going to do it together. So eventually their first real business was a flight school. They taught people how to fly. And the most interesting part about that was that neither one of them knew how to fly.
No way.
And so that's why is the fun part of the story is aviation coming out of the war was the way to go. They were, they both were kind of watching it. And so they got in, but they didn't know how to fly. But they thought that'd be a great business to get into. So they started a flight school. They hired pilots.
Okay.
They went out and got customers. And that was their deal. They were doing the marketing and sales and the business side. They hired the pilots because if you're a pilot teaching people how to fly, most of your time's in a plane with one person. You can't get the next customer. And so they went out and got customers. They dragged airplanes I took the wings off, and they would, tow the airplane through the downtown streets of Grand Rapids, advertising, to go flying. There's some great photos of it. And they would, try to bring people in. That was what they did.
Really terrific.
While the pilots that they had hired were teaching the students how to fly. The other aspect is the airport in the north part of Grand Rapids wasn't complete by the time they opened. And so, but it was right next to the Grand River. So their first pilots, they bought floats for the plane, put a dock down to the river, and the first pilots they trained in the Wolverine Air Service, which was the name of it, learned to fly off the river. Were trained on water. And that went to, they said, well, we can fly it. They couldn't fly at night. They can fly in the daytime, but they needed to work at night. And I remember my dad said the next, it's not the first 40 hours a week that you work. It's the next 40 that you work to get ahead, And so at night they started a drive-in restaurant. Neither one of them knew how to cook. And my dad would tell you that everyone should get in the restaurant business once. It's hard because everyone wants to eat at the same time. If they could just spread it out throughout the whole evening, it would be great. But they had a Riverside drive-in restaurant, so they did the flight school in the daytime. They did that at night, and then they did a few other things until they kind of found their way to direct selling.
Now I understand why principle number 1 is unlimited potential. Yeah. Okay, all right.
Well, and you can see barriers, and you just find your way around it.
Yeah.
Airport wasn't done. Oh, we'll fly off the river.
Wow. Okay. So, and by the way, not only is Amway such a phenomenal business success story, and, if either Rich DeVos or Jay Van Andel had been the founder, that would be extraordinary. But it's also one of the models for business partnership. It really is. And that in and of itself could be a whole new podcast episode.
Absolutely.
Well, what do you mean by accountability with respect to freedom and how this fits in?
Well, it's the idea of accountability really comes through the fact that you're given a set of gifts and talents. We believe we're created by God, and we have these gifts and these talents and opportunities in our lives to do something with them, and we need to be held accountable to do that. And the most basic thing is just being a person of your word. If you say you're going to do something, do it. If you say you're not going to do something, don't do it. And just be honest with people and be honest with yourself. There's so many so many stories, and we've all been there. Say, I need to lose 10 pounds. I'm going to go do this, and we fail. And there's a bit of that in life. But I think we want to have ourselves to a higher level of say, if I'm going to set a goal, I'm going to work to really achieve it. I'm going to do something about it. And I'm going to hold myself accountable to do the things necessary to achieve that goal. And that's the element, especially. So it's one thing to do it for yourself. It's another thing when you're on a team, any sport, a teammate is looking at you. Okay, you're going to catch the ball. I'm going to throw the ball. You're going to tackle the person. You're going to hit the ball, whatever the sport may be. You have illustrations. Well, that's your job, my job, but we're working together to make it happen. And you're going to always maximize your capability when you're working with other people who can round out your edges, who can cover your blind spots, who can, add value to things that you may not see or that you may not know. And so I think the accountability is really to be a person of your word. And to live your life accordingly. And I think if you take the whole concept of believe, it's, okay, that's what I believe. It's easy to talk about it. Then how do you do it? Behavior has to follow belief. And so I think that's where the accountability piece comes in.
Gotcha. So in order for freedom to work, you have to have accountability.
Well, you have to understand the principles and you have to work for it. And so if freedom's going to work, you got to say, okay, I got to make sure that freedom is then a better method than something else. So I need to be more productive. I need to be more creative. I need to be, paying attention to these sorts of things. I need to be educated about it and turn it into all that it can be. But I can't take it for granted. And I can't just assume that it's just that everyone's going to continue to act in the way that it was supposed to be done in the history books. You got to assume somewhere along the way that voters need to vote to preserve the freedom, that fighters need to fight to preserve the freedom, that all of us have a role to play to preserve the freedom. If we're talking about the USA, that we all have a role to play to make the economy work and other elements. And years ago, I had a chance with a local economic club here in Grand Rapids to interview Madeleine Albright and Colin Powell for our annual dinner. And at that time, as in any time, there's always world issues going on, and they talked a lot about the idea of diplomacy through the economic strength of our country, not just the military strength of our country. And so all these elements go into protecting freedom. It's not just one element. It's the idea of being a citizen. And your responsibility as a citizen, as a neighbor, and as a productive member of society, that you're adding value to society. You're going to work every day. You're making something happen. You're starting a new business. You're whatever that talent that you may have, that you're contributing it, that we're part of a contribution society. We're accountable to do that. And when we do all these things and we understand how they work together, we not only preserve and protect our freedom, but build a stronger foundation so that it can be even better for more people going forward.
Well, freedom is such a big word, and it can be misused, abused, taken for granted, but you'll tend to talk about free enterprise. In fact, I kind of think sometimes when I hear American free enterprise, I think, Amway, and I think the DeVos family and
Sure.
the Van Andels. What is free enterprise, and what does that mean?
Well, it starts to, for us, again, it dives into the, some of the elements behind the business success, the productivity of a nation, of a business, of a system, of an economic system, and that the productivity of any system happens when the decisions are made more and more by the individuals, those closer to the opportunity, those closer to the actual work going on, those closer to the problem that's trying to be solved. And in front of Amway, and so I go back to 1964 in New York World Fair. There was the Hall of Free Enterprise that was part of the New York World Fair, and it had in front of it were the pillars of economic wisdom, the 10 pillars of economic wisdom. And in the 1970s, when we built our headquarters building at Amway, Dad and Jay bought that exhibit. And they placed those pillars, not the actual pillars, but the phrases on those pillars, these principles of free enterprise, in front of our headquarters building. And they're still there today. And I think about them often. And then my father gave a speech often called Man's Material Welfare, which was your material welfare, not your spiritual welfare, but in an economic sense, material welfare is determined by a few things, by human energy, and you add human energy to natural resources. So it's the things that everything comes from the world around us that's been created around us. We figure out how to turn it into a stone, a tool, whatever, a plant into food, whatever it is. And so that's an easy equation. It's an addition equation. And then the next part of the equation was you take that and you multiply what can be done between natural resources and human energy by tools. And then it's the ownership of the tools, and it's the creativity of the tools, and the productivity of the tools. When they're in a free society and individuals can make decisions about those tools and how we're going to use that human energy and natural resource to create products and services and goods and all these other sorts of things, that's going to take us, to the next level. And so Dad's speech, of Selling America, when we compared our our free enterprise system to the socialism or communism at the time, that's what sets us apart. That's why the U.S. is more productive. That was why in many stages in the old Soviet Union, they couldn't produce enough food to feed themselves because they had the state-owned farms, and somebody in Moscow, I guess, would tell people how to farm and when they should do it and how they should do it. And we're in the U.S., you just had farmers who knew what they were doing and fed our families, fed our country, and fed the world. And so it's the ownership of those tools. And when those tools are owned, even, and as it says in these pillars of economic wisdom, even when people are well-meaning, even when they're really smart, they're highly educated, they're well-meaning, they're trying to do the right things, nobody can do for you what you can do for yourself. And so that's the idea that you have this ability, and that free enterprise allows you to take that your talents and gifts and turn it into something that's productive, that adds value, and turn it into success for yourself and for your community.
Well, that equation is a great framework to understand, and how that kind of economic prosperity and growth leads to human flourishing and just so much meaning. Well, continuing along, the principle of positivity. You're a very positive person. You have an infectiously positive manner.
Well, so are you, Kevin.
Well, I remember once I was really smiling at my house, and my wife said, "Why are you smiling?" I said, "Well, I just had a great call with Doug DeVos." And she goes, "Have you ever had anything other than a great call with Doug?" Well, that's a great point. And that's a big part of this. What does that mean, and how can our listeners apply what your approach to being positive can contribute to others?
Well, I think one of the things that I learned growing up from from the Amway experience, from my dad and mom, was you can always do something to make things better, and God's never going to give you more than you can handle. And even in difficult times, we got to find a way to go forward. And I wasn't there at the time. My grandfather passed away before I was born. But I remember my dad saying at the funeral, yes, we're all sad, but life is for the living. We have to move on. And even in the most difficult circumstances, you still have to move forward. And then it's a choice. You can choose to look at things positively, or you can choose to look at things negatively. And my grandmother, after my grandfather passed, I remember her talking. I do remember this. She said, I wasn't the most positive person. But after her husband passed, my grandpa, she said, I thought I'd better be positive, or else the kids aren't going to come see me. And so she changed. And when I would go see my grandma DeVos, she was the most positive person. She was always welcoming. She was always this and that. She goes, I never used to be like that. But I needed to be that way because I wanted the kids and the grandkids to come see me and have a good experience. And so I think that positivity is a choice. I just like living there. I can be negative sometimes watching a game, like watching a sporting event when my team's losing. I can get pretty negative, right? But then you got to say, there's always next year. You got to go, there's going to be next year. There's going to be the next game. We're going to, someday we'll get this figured out. And you just have to live that way. But I think it's a choice. And I saw my family and our business go through a lot of difficult times. But I just saw, Dad and Jay at Amway, and my mom and dad and our family just choose to find a positive direction out of it all, to find a solution, and then to move towards that solution. And that has just become a hallmark to say, okay, well, it's bad now, but what can we do? Let's do something else. I'm in a bad job. I don't like my job. Let's go find another one. There's a lot of people looking for good people, and maybe you can make the connection somewhere else. Whatever it is, you're never stuck. That was the biggest thing in the Depression, my grandfather, lost his job. They lost their home. They were in a difficult situation. But my grandfather kept telling my dad and his sisters, someday I'm going to get my job back. Someday, we're going to move forward. Like the letters Dad and Jay exchanged. They just were always like, someday it's going to get better. We're not stuck. And he chose to be positive and to find their way through. And so that's the element, or the background to that.
Wow. Well, I don't think we would naturally think of positivity as a principle, but it's such a great illustration too, because I think history demonstrates we're naturally attracted to people who offer a more optimistic outlook on the future. And that story about your grandmother that also shows that we can change. We're not set in our ways. We can actually change. Well, that actually dovetails nicely or continues nicely into the point about human dignity and the respect for others, another key principle of believe. Love your comments on that. One thing that I've thought about, you all are involved in so many different things, and your family owns the Orlando Magic basketball team, and I don't know whether it was with your dad or just the extension of your family today, but just the manner in which you all have taken an interest in the well-being of the players on the team.
Sure.
To me is a helpful illustration of that principle of respect.
Yeah.
Tell me more about that.
Well, it really starts from a faith foundation, right? That God created all of us and created all of us with different talents, unique talents, skills, gifts, and therefore everyone's, just by being a person is worthy of that respect because just who they are, just their existence, and that in that case, I can't add anything to your value as a person that's already been created in you, nor can I take anything away from your value as a person. And so it really goes to, I just need to recognize that and live accordingly. And you may look differently than me. You may believe something differently than me. You may pursue other goals or see things differently than me. But that doesn't diminish your value that you have. And so when you live that way and you see the value of everybody in the world around you, you start to think about how you fit in. Okay, how do I now show people that I see they have value? How do I give people that level of respect? And how do I then relate to them? Because I should probably have a similar level of respect as well. So I have an element of self-respect because I'm giving respect. If I'm going to give respect to you, it seems reasonable to expect that you're going to give a level of respect to me. Now we're working in a partnership. Now we're working in a relationship in a way that allows us to be more productive with one another. And so this idea is absolutely fundamental. In the Amway business, again, I told you I was going to go, forgive me for going to all these stories, but in the early days, in the way our business model works, anybody can join Amway. You can, you get sponsored by somebody, but anyone can join. And in the early days, there was a consultant that went to Dad and Jay and said, well, you might want to rethink that. You might want to put some qualifiers out there. You might have an educational standard. Maybe they need some sales experience, and they should, be good at making presentations and product demonstrations and these sorts of things. And kind of went through his list of what they should do. And Dad and Jay fired him. And they fired him, and they told us the stories because the question was, who do you want to leave out? Why do we do all these sorts of things to leave people out? It's up to us. We felt in our business it's up to us to give them the opportunity. It's up to them to deliver. They've got to, do something with it and turn it into something. But that comes from an element of respecting everybody, rather than saying, well, I respect you because you have this degree and I don't respect that person because they don't have that degree. Wait a minute. What are we doing? It's Dr. Seuss, Starbelly Sneetches. I mean, right?
Yeah.
What sort of qualification are we trying to say if this person has value and this person doesn't? Now, I'm all for education, but I'm also seeing people that have street smarts who don't have formal education are really smart people that I've experienced in my life. And so this idea of human dignity, because we don't want to leave anybody out. Unfortunately, the history of the world is trying to figure out how to leave people out. Every job application, whether it's a criminal background or whether it's an educational background or what all these sorts of things. Why is that? So HR can easily go through and eliminate people so we only get the best. Really? Is that the best way to do it?
And are you getting the best?
Are you really getting the best?
That ties back to your whole point about unlimited potential.
Exactly.
If we all have unlimited potential.
Exactly right.
Wow. All right. So another principle is about America.
Yeah.
And you have continued your dad's service with the National Constitution Center. You're the chairman of the board, the amazing entity based in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And here we are about to celebrate America's 250th birthday. Yeah. How is all that relevant to us today?
Wow. Well, you're getting me going on a lot of different tracks here, Kevin.
That's because you're involved in so much stuff, Doug.
Right.
We're going big.
Yeah, we're going big. This is how you go big. Yeah, you definitely bite off more than you can chew. Well, just a little bit on the National Constitution Center. Maybe I just tend to tell a story. One of the things, the reasons, again, like I said, I do basically just follow my parents, right, and do what they did because they did pretty well. In the late 90s, they wanted to do something significant, to demonstrate a little bit of their patriotism. They'd been very generous here locally in social causes and that, but they really wanted to do something at a bigger scale. And there were two options. One was the visitor center at the Capitol building that was being proposed at that time, and the other was the National Constitution Center in Pennsylvania, in Philadelphia. And they chose that one. And they got deeply involved with it as it was being developed and created. And when I went to it, the opening in 2003, I had a chance to sit next to a Supreme Court justice. And nothing quite lets you know how uneducated, uninformed, or any other thing you want than sitting next to a Supreme Court justice, where it was Antonin Scalia.
Well, particularly Scalia. My goodness,
yeah.
He was such a powerful.
So
force.
I'm sitting there going, okay, how am I going to talk to But it just, and he was amazing and he was lovely, but it just helped you think and solidify how special this country is and how much work it took not only to establish it and the establishment of the Constitution or the time of the Revolutionary War, the Declaration of Independence, and all those elements, but how much work it takes to hold it together, and how many things we've done wrong, and to recognize that, like any of us as an individual, like any organization, community, or company, make mistakes. And devastating. But we have built into our Constitution, into our country, the ability to change and improve and to get better. And the promise of America is that we can get better and that we can move forward and that we have within our grasp and our ability the opportunity to improve. And so when you look at our history, we're not doomed to repeat it. We're actually required or empowered to overcome some of the things that we've done wrong. And when we recognize that, and then when we spend our time making sure everyone feels part of our country, and all the other principles that we've been talking about, everyone has something to contribute. Everyone has something to add. There's value that can be given, and we can make our country better so we can be a better place of opportunity, prosperity for more and more people. And so the idea of America, the principles that are enshrined in the Declaration, and we Jeff Rosen, who's the CEO at the National Constitution Center, does a wonderful job of unpacking the phrase "the pursuit of happiness," and as he goes, there's a lot to that phrase, and there's a lot of history and why it was used. The core element was that it was not to feel good. Pursuing happiness wasn't to feel good. It was to pursue being good, to have virtues, and to live your life in the service of others. And so it was about overcoming passion and using reason to pursue a life of being good. And so, forgive me, but that's again a long story of coming back to why I believe in our country so much, and how operating or trying to think about things at that level can create a level of unity that you don't see in all of our politics today. We have a lot of discussions and debates at the National Constitution Center with scholars on both sides of the intellectual spectrum, conservative or liberal, or however you want to define that spectrum. And they really like debating, and they really like making their case, and they really like finding what's wrong with the other side. And then they have a cup of coffee and sit around and talk about it and other sorts of things. And then they learn from each other. And that's one of the things that when Jeff would conduct some similar things, he'll have we'll have a session, and a given topic will be out there, and he'll say, okay, before the meeting, how many believe this? And hands will go up. And how many kind of believe this on the side of the issue? And other hands will go up. And at the end of the discussion and the presentation, he'll do the same thing, and roughly the same amount of hands go up for either side. So not too many people change their position. But then he asked the third question and said, do you have a better understanding of the other side? And that's when everybody's hand goes up. And that's the idea. Is you get together, you have a better understanding of each other. And now, okay, I may not agree with that position, but I know why you do. And that might get me to thinking that maybe I'm not as perfect in my position as I thought I may have been. Maybe there's some things I didn't consider that you're considering, and maybe you're doing the same thing. So maybe we can find a way to work together or figure something out. But I believe that as an imperfect country, we can still work to be more perfect, and we got to keep trying. So
in order to form a more perfect union, these principles really intertwine. Freedom with accountability, unlimited potential, back to respect for others, related to this. All right, let's keep going. Persistence.
Sure.
Give us your take on that.
Well, it's just, you just don't give up, right?
Is that an encouragement or a chastisement?
No, it's an encouragement. It's definitely an encouragement. It is just, okay, I got to figure out, as we talked earlier about barriers in life, I'm going to figure out how to go over it, around it, below it, or whatever I got to do, or reframe the whole thing. So, we did a session at, on innovation at Amway years ago, and I think the gentleman's name was Mike Vance, who came in, and he wrote, you got to think outside the box, and many times he would say, innovation, yeah, it can be something completely new. Yeah, I just thought of this new idea, but many times it's putting together the things you already know in a new way, and so. You got to, you may have a different box of your thinking, but maybe if you put it together in a new way, you create a new box, and now you can find the solution, to your problem. And so, I think persistence is just, you just keep trying to figure it out. In a sporting context, how do I, How do I throw a strike? How do I get the ball in the hoop? How do I, avoid, sack the quarterback or whatever the illustration is. I like to use sports illustrations a lot, but I think it's a very positive thing. It's just I'm just going to keep trying to figure it out and trying to find a new and a better way, to get something done. And so, and that it's more than just, banging your head against the wall and keep doing it over and over again. It's finding creative ways to do it. But that's what makes life fun. How fun would it be to think, well, yeah, there's a problem in the world. Well, I guess there's just nothing we can do about it. It's like Eeyore on Winnie the Pooh, right? Well, it's just the way it is. You can't fight City Hall. You can't do this. Well, yeah, maybe there are big barriers, but I don't know. What can you do? Let's figure it out. So I think persistence is a very positive term. It's not somebody telling you to persist. Just keep going. Just keep working harder. It's an inside out thing, and it's a positive thing. So I'm just going to keep trying to figure it out. How do I be better? How do I sell more stuff? How do I make a better product? How do I make a better mousetrap? How do I build a better relationship with my spouse, with my family, with my neighbor, with our community? All those sorts of things. I'm just going to keep trying to figure it out, and I'm not going to be discouraged. Maybe somebody treats me badly, or they say the wrong thing, or I'm just going to go, well, maybe they don't know me yet. I'm going to try again. Just keep trying. See what we can do.
Wow, that's really awesome. Well, I got a couple more to close us out on, but our good friend Andreas Widmer, you've had him on your podcast.
Yes.
I've had him on mine. He talks about the art of principled entrepreneurship, especially related to Art Sioka, who developed boxed wine out of necessity because he bought this company and didn't realize he'd lost this price advantage on glass, and he was out of the market, and he came up with this idea for boxed wine. But how many hundreds of failures he had. Safeway banned him from coming in. The things leaked and all these other problems, but he kept on trying. And we tend to see the success. It's like, oh, this person must have had it easy all their life. But you look into it, it's a pretty rigorous path they took to get there. All right, well, next is faith.
Yeah.
And you and your wife and your family are very involved here in Grand Rapids, Michigan. You have a belief in your city, and you had an event earlier this year I attended, Believe in Our City.
Yes.
And you started the presentation with 300 or 400 business leaders, other community leaders from Grand Rapids, very disparate, diverse group. And you started off talking about grace.
Yeah. Yeah.
Comment on that.
Yeah. Well, it's obviously the concept comes from our faith, right? That I'm a sinner saved by grace. And that as a Christian, I believe that, that is once you celebrate Christmas and you celebrate Easter, that God bridged the gap through Jesus Christ to overcome that sin, not because of what I've done. Definitely not what I've done or what I'm doing. There's no way I'm ever going to be good enough, but I'm loved anyway. And so it's that grace that's been given to me. And in a context, sometimes when people are coming from different points of view, and you're getting together as a community, and you're going to talk, some challenging issues. We talked about race a lot. We talked about economic opportunity a lot. We talked about other business opportunities.
I know economic mobility, which is all tied together.
Economic mobility. We talked about all those things, and we had a lot of government officials and people on different sides of of the political spectrum. That when you're at a table and somebody is saying something, they may not say it right. They may say something that tweaks you or just hits you wrong. Rather than responding, just let it go. Just have a little grace. Just let it go. And if you say something, or in the case I use, if I say something that offends anybody, I'm going to ask for it. Just give me a little grace. I don't know. It's an uninformed position. Certainly not my intention. And so raise it with me. You can say, boy, when you said that, you made me feel bad. Oh my gosh, thank you for telling me. I will absolutely try to find a better way to speak or communicate or engage or whatever the case may be. So the idea is that if God gives us grace at such a magnificent level to overcome this gap of sin between him and us and me, then maybe we can at least give a little grace between one another from time to time and not react so negatively when somebody says something that bothers me. Maybe they didn't intend it. Maybe they intended what they said, but they didn't mean to make me mad about it. I don't know. But if I give them a little grace, maybe I'll find out. And maybe I can build a relationship and maybe I'll learn something, because I could be wrong. That's something I think we all got to remember. I could be wrong. Again, Maria tells me that a lot. Doug, you might just be wrong about this. So I think it's an important element when you come together with a lot of people that, I may say something that bothers somebody. I hope they give me a little grace, and I hope they say, when you said that, I didn't appreciate it. Wow, I'm sorry. Then it gives me a chance to say, I'm sorry. What can I do? Can I overcome it? And so I think that's an important element just in relationships to and for me, from a faith perspective, it comes because if I believe that I've been given grace, I don't deserve it, that I should share it, and I should do the same for others, rather than just react or assume bad intent. Maybe there is, I don't know, but I think that element's important to kind of to have a part of our life.
Amen. Well,
yeah.
All right. Well, last thing is family.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the last thing. It's one of the most important things. I remember at your dad, Rich DeVos's memorial service, there were 4 principles that he talked about: faith, family, freedom, and philanthropy. In fact, I think if you joke that from a marketing standpoint, if your dad could have spelled philanthropy with an F, he would have.
Yeah, exactly.
So that it would all come together. But tell us what define family and why that's a principle of some importance.
Yeah, for us growing up in our family, and most of the stories I've talked about, most of the experiences I've had, I've been incredibly blessed to grow up with mom and dad who loved me, who supported me, who encouraged me, who gave me grace as well. I think there's a few years in my life when I wasn't very lovable, and they told me about it. I mean, they made sure I knew, but they loved me anyway. And because of that experience, you find that this group of people that I didn't choose are the most important to me. And that I look to the most for love or support or comfort, that I cherish and value the most and look to be with on a regular basis. My parents, my siblings, now Maria and our children and grandchildren. And so this idea is powerful. And it breaks my heart when somebody didn't have that experience, if they had a different experience, or maybe they didn't know their family, or they have a very a non-traditional family setup that can still be family. A second marriage, something else. You can still find people in your life that you're close to, that you can create this idea of family. Because I don't want to restrict the idea with just only one definition. How do you have people in your life that are important to you? But in my experience, in my case, it was this idea that I had a place in a group of people where I knew I was loved, even when I was unlovable, that taught me, that helped me, that supported me, and that gave me a place to always go back to if I felt lonely or out of touch. And the value of that and the idea is that, gosh, I want everybody to have that experience. And you may have a parent, there's people who've come from an abusive background, and it's tragic. And so you're not going to have it from your mom or your dad or siblings or adults in your life when you were young. But how do we find that? How do we surround people and support them with this idea then? And those struggles are not just now. There's been a lot of there's been a lot of bad parents in this world over the course of time, and so it became something. Back to your point, it became something that was a focal point for us and for me. That and we work at it a lot. It's not just everything's kumbaya. We work through struggles and challenges and figure it out, but find a way to keep coming together and support one another. And I like taking the concept, as I was saying earlier, I like taking the concept and broadening it to make sure people feel included. This idea of a sense of belonging. We can say in a community there's a sense of belonging. And everyone belongs in our community, whether it's Grand Rapids or it's a neighborhood in Grand Rapids, and that's great. But that's not quite personal enough. And at some point, family, who's that adult down the street? Who's that somebody who's going to invest in you when you're young, or walk with you when you're in your formative years, or still be there with you in your older years, whatever it is? Who are those people in your life? And so that's the idea I think that we're trying to get to with family.
Oh, by the way, your dad had that book, one of his many books, about 10 powerful words and phrases, something or another, and some of them were, I love you and I'm sorry. He told me the story that when you were a rather rambunctious teenager, that you'd broken curfew one night. There was a curfew set, and he was waiting up for you, and he was getting kind of sort of angrier and angrier by the minute or hour as you came in late, and you came in. And he was so upset, and then you came and you looked at him and you used those powerful words and phrases. You said, I'm sorry and I love you. And he said he just melted. Is that a true story?
Yes, it is. And it wasn't just one night I may have been late for curfew. It might have been a lot of them. But yeah, the phrase, I'm sorry, I'm wrong. I love you, and then if you kind of turn some of the other phrases around and say, I'm proud of you, I respect you, thank you, just simple phrases that you can learn, use in life. And I read his book, so I got to use it on him, and I can, from personal experience, I can tell you it works because it wasn't just words. I knew I was wrong. So I can sit there and argue all day. I knew what I was told, and I knew what I did. And I was wrong. And I didn't want him to be mad at me, and I didn't feel good about it. And, one of the things you do when you're a teenager is you make stupid choices or bad decisions or whatever the case may be that seemed to be at the time. But, I don't want my dad waiting up for me, being angry. I didn't appreciate doing it for my kids either, but they read the book as well. They used it on me the same way.
It's a great book,
and but it's really those phrases of how to establish a relationship, and even when things go wrong.
All right, I've got 2 wrap-up questions.
Sure.
This has been terrific. Thank you for giving us all your time today, Doug DeVos. Doug, what advice would you give to your younger self, if you could? Looking back maybe on those days as a teenager in your 20s or whatever, you've had a remarkable life, and you got many, many years ahead. Looking forward to all these things that you're going to do to continue to go big. What advice would you give to your younger self?
I think a couple of things come to mind. Probably one, be more curious, ask more questions, and kind of associated with it, learn faster. Like I said, I wasn't late only one night. I don't need to make a mistake 20 times. I wish I would have made a mistake a couple times and then learned from it. Or I wish I would have asked more questions sooner when I thought I was right. I was so sure I was right and I was going to fight for it. And I forgot to ask a question because knowing a little more information would have been helpful in whatever the situation may have been. So I those are the two things that really come to me. How do I learn faster? How do I stay curious? Keep asking questions and recognize that while I have a belief system and this is what I believe, I may not always be right on everything that's happening in my life. And because I've also learned I'm surrounded by a lot of really smart people who are observant and who care and so those are a couple of things that come to mind that I look back on. I say, wow, I wish I do better at that. And I'm trying and kind of follow on. I'm trying to do that now. I'm trying to do a better job of phrasing things in meetings and interactions with people. Trying to do a better job to ask questions. I'm trying to do a better job of finding out about where they're coming from, what's going on in their life, what they're dealing with, what they're seeing about a given issue, whatever it may be. And so I'm trying to figure out how to apply those things because I'm not dead yet.
Thank goodness. All right. Well, this is the Going Big podcast. I'm really intended to inspire people to dream big, cast big, bold visions, big, hairy, audacious goals, sure. Moonshots. Again, your family is a great description of that. But what advice would you give us in closing out, those that are listening, as to how to think about going big in the rest of our lives?
Sure. Keep dreaming. Keep dreaming. Don't ever think you're stuck. Don't ever think you're stuck. Whatever the case may be, whatever the situation may be, keep dreaming. Keep challenging yourself. Keep asking those questions. Keep driving yourself. To achieve the next level. It's just these phrases. Oh, you're never going to do that. So, well, you can't say it's never going to be done. Somebody just hasn't figured it out yet. That's what the beauty of time. And so to go big, I always encourage people, keep dreaming. What do you want to go big at? What is it? What's it look like? Don't stop. This idea that we have the ability to try. We have the ability to dream. We have the ability to see things that aren't existing yet and figure out how to help make them exist, how to put them in place. Again, in our material sense, in the world where we live, there's so many things that we can do. And so my encouragement is to everybody to go big. Go back to unlimited potential, believing in people and believing in yourself. And with that idea that that world creates so much opportunity if we're just willing to do something about it. And if you're not dreaming and if you're not willing to do something about it, then it's going to be really hard to go big. But if you got a dream and a goal and an aspiration and you're willing to try and you're willing to do things maybe differently and you're willing to learn along the way, then I believe you can achieve it. And so that's what we all should be trying to do in our lives and in all different aspects.
Well, Doug DeVos, it is always a pleasure to spend time with you. I hope we can do this again.
Absolutely. Anytime, Kevin. You bet, my friend.
All right, let's go big.
All right, keep going big, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin.
Thanks, Doug. Thanks for listening to today's Going Big podcast. Hopefully you were inspired to go big for your cause. Remember, this is all about transforming your effectiveness by 10xing your fundraising. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe or leave us a review at iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or wherever you listen to podcasts. You can also catch this episode on YouTube. And also, there are lots of resources available to you at my website, which is 10xstrategies.com. That's TENX strategies.com. You can sign up also for our free weekly fundraising tips. This is all about helping you get to the root causes of some of the biggest problems in society today by transforming your fundraising and your effectiveness. Thanks again. We'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.